Hey guys, welcome back. A short little discussion of memory aids. You've all had the first exam, so I bet you're looking for some tips on how to improve your memory. So I have recommended to you that you use mnemonic devices maybe for this chapter. So what is a mnemonic device? You've used them all your life. If you memorized Roy G. Biv to remember the colors of the rainbow, or if you memorized Every Good Boy Does Fine to remember the lines on the treble clef staff, or if you remembered FACE, F-A-C-E, for the spaces in between the lines to remember the treble clef, those are all mnemonic devices. These are simple shortcuts that help us associate the information we want to remember with an image, a sentence, or a word. PEMDAS is another example. My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas was what I remembered when I was a kid to remember the planets. Of course, Pluto got demoted and is no longer a planet, so I don't remember what they tell kids these days. But mnemonic devices are going to be very helpful for you. If you're trying to remember, say, for example, encoding, storage, and retrieval, ESR, try to come up with something silly to remember that. Or the working model of memory. You might use a mnemonic device for that. Method of loci is a very interesting one. I've done activities with my classes before and nobody seemed very interested in this, but it's actually a very powerful tool that people who are really amazing at remembering things use. It's also called a mind palace. If you ever saw the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock on BBC or Netflix or PBS maybe. Anyway, really good show. Love that show. And Sherlock uses a mind palace. So this is a system where you think about a room or a space. Sherlock was very good at this, and so he had a palace in his mind. You might just start with your bedroom, for example. And so if you want to remember EGBDF for the treble clef, you might go around your room. So first you have to take the steps of looking at your room in your mind's eye and putting a number with each of the items in your room. So maybe the bed is number 1, the pillow is number 2, the desk is number 3, and the computer is number 4, and a dresser is number 5, something like that. And you're always going to go in that order. So you have to really visualize it, and you have to first learn 1 is bed, 2 is pillow, 3 is desk, 4 is computer, 5 is the dresser. And then what you do is you are going to associate each of these with an item. So I'm going to place the E on the bed. So I might imagine a giant E on the bed, or I might imagine the word bed written, but the E is really big. And then G is going to be the second one in my list, and so that has to be our second one in the room, the pillow. So I might think to myself, ooh, this is a really good goose down pillow, something like that. B is the third one, so our third item is the desk. So I might put a stack of books on the desk, and that'll help me remember B is on the desk. D is the next one, and the next one was the computer. So I might think about the drive in the computer. You can notice mine tend to be very verbal, very linguistic, but you might have pictures. You might think better in pictures. So I might think of the hard drive in the computer, and then I would know that D goes there. And then F is the dresser. So I might think about folding clothes and putting them in the dresser. So that's the method of loci, or the mind palace. So you have a space, maybe your room, your house, a palace, number all of the items in the place, and then you're going to number the items that you need to remember and associate them. A mnemonic device in which a person visualizes items to be learned with landmarks in some familiar place. Sorry, that should be right under there. That's a definition of mind palace. That should be just tapped over a little bit. All right, so I might link to this in, we're not going to show this video, it's very long, but I might use that, I might link that in Canvas. So you might consider using the mind palace to remember this. This is a pretty big diagram. You're going to need to know all of that for the test. So sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory, and then long-term has explicit memories that you're aware of, and that's divided into semantic and episodic. And then implicit memory is memories outside of your awareness. That's procedural, and then other types of implicit memory. So you might just challenge yourself to try the method of loci and see if you can remember this that way. Be fun. There are some other ways to do it, though, if that one doesn't grab you. Elaborative rehearsal is where you connect information to knowledge that you already have. This is a very deep level of encoding. So, for example, you might visualize a hippocampus learning his way around campus to help you remember that the hippocampus is involved in learning and memory. So this guy is like lumbering around your campus. And I want you to be aware that there are two types of ways to study, massed practice and distributed practice. So massed practice is cramming. This is the night before you're like, okay, I'm going to go on an all-night binge and I'm just going to study for like 6 hours and I'm not going to sleep, and then I'm going to go into the test and I'm going to ace it. I'll tell you that is almost never going to be successful, partly because you will have missed the opportunity to sleep. And every time you sleep, your memories become more firmly encoded. So don't do that. Distributed practice is definitely better. This is separated study or practice sessions. So I always encourage you in my emails that you should study 20 to 30 minutes per day, quizzing yourself repeatedly over the material. And you should be doing that, 4 or 5 times before the test is taken. All right. You might consider using these tricks to remember all of these things. So let's think about how clustering can help your memory. So clustering is where we have related items clustered together to form categories. Related categories that are clustered together form higher order categories. So we might remember list items better if the list is presented in categories, and we have poorer recall if they're presented randomly. And even if a list is presented randomly, people will still organize the information into a logical pattern. So in class, I like to do a quick demo, and I'll show this in class for like a minute or two and let people read through it, and then I'll say, go ahead and write down all of the words that you can remember, and then I'll hide this. Now, I won't ask you to do it here, but you're certainly welcome to, and probably what happens, the people who remember the most words usually cluster them. So chair, footstool, lamp, dresser, sofa are all furniture. Orange, pear, peach, apple, strawberry are all fruits. And then boat, bus, train, bicycle, airplane, car are all types of transportation. So the people who tend to remember the most will tend to cluster them together. So then I usually like to do this demonstration. I'll ask everybody to spend 3 to 5 seconds reading each of the following sentences, listing them only once. And so as soon as you're finished, I would ask people to cover the list and write down as many as they can remember. And they don't need to write can be used as. And so we have things like a brick can be used as a doorstop, a ladder can be used as a bookshelf, a wine bottle can be used as a candle holder. And so usually the most I think I've ever gotten on this is maybe like 10 or 12. A lot of people are stuck at like 6 or 7. I don't have particularly good working memory, so I don't know how many I would get. But then what I do after we've done that is I say, okay, don't look back at the list, but you can look at this. Okay, and now this is, these are words, one word from each of the pairs. And so flashlight is here. And that will probably trigger you a little bit to remember a flashlight can be used to hold water. Or sheet. Would be a sheet can be used as a sail. And so what we do is, what I want you to think about here is that when we have a retrieval cue, that can help us to remember. So this is the difference between a multiple choice test and an essay test. Which one would you rather have? Multiple choice, right? So you want those retrieval cues because it's a stimulus that aids in the retrieval of information that's difficult to access. So that's the difference between a recall test and a recognition test. Recall is where we have to retrieve the information without retrieval cues. That's an essay test, and that does tend to be harder. than a recognition test where you match incoming data to information stored in long-term memory. This is an example of the World Memory Championships is a test called 1 hour numbers discipline, and they're given sheets and sheets of numbers, and they're asked to memorize as many as possible in 1 hour. So that's recall. But most of you, I assume, would rather have a recognition test. So another factor in remembering things is the serial position effect. Christina Aguilera fairly famously botched the Star-Spangled Banner when she performed at the 2011 Super Bowl. Even seasoned performers are not immune to the serial position effect. The serial position effect is the tendency to remember items at the beginning and end of a list better than items in the middle. So we have the primacy effect, where we tend to recall the first items in a list, and we have the recency effect, which is the tendency to recall the final items in a list. But what do we forget? The middle. So watch the video of Christina. She handles it like a pro. But see if you can figure out which part of the Star-Spangled Banner she forgot. All right, so did you remember? So it was actually the middle part, I think it was, or the ramparts we watched. It's in there. So primacy effect, we tend to remember the beginning, and then recency effect, we tend to remember the end. So if I send you to the store with a list of 10 things, you're probably going to remember items 1, 2, and 3, maybe 9 and 10, but 5, 6, and 7 will probably be forgotten. All right, that's it for remembering and some tips and tricks for studying a little bit better. And I'll see you in the next video for false memory.